Excited. We're going to talk with Ryan Day, head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. So, Coach, look, we had read about your team all summer. We know the standard. We know the talent. But there were massive expectations. We're 2 weeks into this. You've taken care of business. Was there a moment this summer? Was there a moment through the first 2 weeks where you felt like, okay, I feel like I know who my team is?
Well, yeah, we've had a lot of guys that, are from last year's team, the last couple of years' team, and these guys have been around the program a while. So, it's not like it's a brand new squad. We did add, I think, 7 guys from the transfer portal and certainly had a good recruiting class. But the nucleus of this group has been here for a while. So, I think we know what we have. Now we're still just in the beginning stages of this race that we're in. And again, just kind of coming out of the gates, and our guys understand that they do. And we've reiterated that this week. And, we know that this is going to be a long road. And so this week we've spent time making sure that we're, going back to fundamentals and making sure we're getting guys a lot of reps in practice, because we're going to need a lot of guys. And, I think there's still some young guys that we're figuring that part of it out. But for the guys who are more experienced, I think we have a good feel for that part of our team. But every year is a little different, and some of the new pieces make it unique.
I know it's not really that many more games, but college football has added some to the schedule here quite a bit in the last few years. And I know over the years of getting to know some NFL people, like they'll really try to map it out. It's a difficult game. Is there more to planning for a season when you expect to be playing 15 plus games?
I don't know if it's more. It's different, and it's not like markedly different. But it is going to be a different end of the season. That's a fact. So as you start to work on your season and plan on your season, I think part of it depends on what your schedule looks like. During the regular season, I think everybody's in a different rhythm. When you look at some teams, look at like Clemson and Georgia, they played a marquee matchup the first game of the year. The last couple of years, we played Notre Dame early in the season. This year, we didn't have that. So it's just, every team's kind of on a different journey that way. So that part of it's different, but we're all going to end the season the same way with the same type of format. So we've talked about that as a team. We've talked about that, obviously, as coaches and staff, and Mick Marotti, who, is the best in the business at what he does, and projecting out what that's supposed to look like, and, schematically, but most importantly, our guys in terms of, the physicality of things and the mindset as they head in towards the end of the year. But we're a long way away from that right now.
You mentioned it. Would you rather have a big test in the first 3 weeks?
It's just different. Yeah, it's just different. Every year is different. And I don't think one's good, one's bad. It's just different along the way. And, the key is when you look at your 12-game season, you're going to have these games, and where they are on your schedule is what it is. And so we have to just make sure that we're staying focused on every single week and every single opponent. And we always do, but you got to respect every single opponent that you play. And the minute you don't, you set yourself up. And so you hear a lot of coaches talk, and we do the same thing about what is our standard. We have to play to our standard. It shouldn't matter what the opponent is. And so we have to make sure we're staying on that and not focused, necessarily on the results as it is, the process. And again, a lot of coach speak there, but it's there for a reason, because that's what you need to do. It's not maybe flashy or sexy. And in a world with a lot of distractions, we can't lose our focus.
The way the portal's talked about, it's as if it's this grocery list, for these programs now. It's like, okay, well, let's go get this guy. And maybe from the outside, we can look at it like the approach is now different in recruiting. But, sometimes I'll think about it and be like, okay, but you brought in Justin Fields. So like how is that different than necessarily what you're doing now? How would you, there has to be maybe something or an urgency. How has it changed perhaps what you think is possible in the off season for a roster?
I think the landscape's different, but when you look at our team, and I think people have made a big deal of our team, but the majority of it is guys that decided to come back. It was, big focus was the retaining of our roster. And then we certainly had a unique opportunity when Coach Saban, retired at Alabama. There was a few guys that became available. And so, we added, I think, 7 guys in the portal. And, there's certainly, a lot of teams that, recruit out of the portal maybe a little bit more than we do. We believe here at Ohio State, the right formula for us is to recruit at a high level, develop, and then retain that team that's here. And one thing that we've learned during the last year or so, in this, NIL age, is that there's a lot of opportunities for Ohio State football players. The marketability of our players is significant, and that's all being kind of played out in real time and allowing us kind of a benchmark as we move forward. Because when you have a fan base of over 12 million and what comes with the Ohio State brand, it's significant to be an Ohio State football player. And so the opportunities are there, and that's clear to see. And I think as the market's being set, I think Ohio State's leading the way.
I want to talk about Chip because I think the relationship is just so unique. I've known him for years, going back to, I remember just getting the Globe when I was living in Boston. I'd be like, what are they doing up at UNH? Like, who's this Ricky Santos guy? Like, what is going on up there? And these numbers every weekend, you'd read them. You played for him. You end up joining him in a couple stops in the NFL. He's out here in Los Angeles, and then he comes back. How much of an advantage is your relationship when you're looking at the game, like philosophically of like who you want to be on that side of the football? What kind of advantage does that relationship give you?
I think there's 2 things. One is the trust. I think that's very, very important when you're dealing in a pressure-packed environment. Trust is critically important because you're going to go through a lot of pressure-packed moments. In game, post game, and when there's a certain level of trust there, you can have real conversation. You can have conflict, but you leave the room arms around each other, knowing that you love each other and you're saying the same message, and that everybody's on board and there's alignment there and loyalty. And to me, that's like the number one thing when it comes to the schematics of it. I mean, I played for Chip, and then I coached for him, so we see things very, very similar. Now, since the 7 years that we were apart. We kind of went down a different road than he did at UCLA. And it's been great because a lot of guys in that offensive staff room, see things the same way, including myself. It's very much in line with the way that Chip sees it, but he also sees it from a different perspective as well in certain areas. So that perspective has been refreshing, I think, for everybody in that room, to see things maybe a little bit different, challenge certain things. And so I think the chemistry in that room is good. But so I think 2 things. One, there's a commonality there, but there's also a fresh perspective. And then 2, the overall trust, between he and I think really, so far has allowed us to, address some real issues in that room in terms of like real hard questions that need to be answered. And there's going to be bigger challenges ahead, as we know.
What was the first conversation like between you? Because I know he loves you. He's talked about you to me for years, and it's not only playing and you coaching with him coaching you and all this stuff, but like the first time maybe were you thinking, hey, could we do this? Could this happen?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of everything that came up during the conversation, but, it was kind of one of those things where I know we always wanted to coach again together. And, I kind of threw it out there, and I think there was a certain, time frame where, kind of had to process it all. And the timing wasn't right really the first time around. He had a lot going on there at UCLA and wanted to make sure, if he were to go down this road, that he wanted to handle it the right way, which I thought he did an unbelievable job of doing. But the conversations that we had was that he really enjoyed being in that room and coaching the quarterbacks during the bowl game. And he missed that part of it. He missed just the football end of it. And, he's going to be, very much involved in recruiting and so many other things. But like I can focus on, all these other things now that come with being the head football coach, where, he can focus more on the football, which is refreshing to him. And so he's obviously been excited about that part of it.
It really feels like the head coaching position, especially at a program like Ohio State. It's a short list of programs in the country where the standards are what they are. Um, there have to be times where you're like, this isn't even about football anymore. I'm being pulled in all of these different directions. How do you deal with like getting your dream job and then realizing that the job maybe isn't exactly what you thought about or what you thought it would be when you were younger and you were an assistant?
Yeah. And sometimes the reasons and the characteristics that, you display in order to have an opportunity like this and, um, and get a job like this isn't necessarily what you need in order to do the job, which is unique. I always kind of felt like I was, someone who wanted to be a head coach and really spent a lot of time with, the head coaches that I was fortunate enough to be around, some great mentors. Because this profession is really about apprenticeship. You don't go to school to be a football coach. Where do you learn about the schematics of football? Where do you learn about, all the things that come with, the public relations part, the recruiting, the staff management. I mean, there's just so many different things that come with, quote unquote, being a CEO. And, I went to school at the University of New Hampshire for business management, got my master's in administrative studies at Boston College. And there's a lot of things that you learn during that process that helps you become a better football coach. But there's a lot that you have to learn through apprenticeship. And that was something that I was very fortunate to be around great coaches and tried to take something from each of those guys. And then when you have this opportunity, the landscape changes quickly and you have to be willing to adapt. And that's one of the things that I've come to grips with, is that every year it's going to be different. I mean, the first year was its own set of challenges, and then COVID came, and now the different changes in the landscape, and being able to adapt and being comfortable with not knowing what's coming next is something that you have to, grab onto. And I think leadership is important during uncertain times. And we've had those moments even, in the time that I've been the head coach here. So, but you also learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself every time, you go through a season, you learn more and more. I'm now 45 years old and I feel like I'm in a different place than I was when I started here. And you learn every year and you grow from it. And so, that's the job right now. And in order to move up in this profession, you have to give up, and I think I've certainly embraced that this year and making sure that, I'm able to step away a little bit more from the offense and get more involved in these other things that you're talking about.
So you mentioned your background, and I'll just share with you. I think the only non-sports job I've ever had once I graduated was I was an insurance consultant. I wasn't even an insurance salesman, which is really hard to do, to be a consultant in an industry that you've never actually worked in. So that didn't quite work out, but it was a few months, and I knew immediately. I was like, I don't want to do this.
Right.
But it made my dad feel better about his son. He's like, you did go to school. Was there ever a moment in your timeline where you think about the sacrifice, what kind of lifestyle that you're taking on, finding a way to navigate through all these coaching circles and knowing that, hey, if this doesn't really work out, like maybe I end up being an assistant for the rest of my life in the middle of nowhere and all these different. Did you ever have a moment where you were going to go non-football?
Yeah. Yeah. You during the process, our family, Nina and I grew up in the same hometown. Her dad was a basketball coach and in town, and he kind of stayed there, during his career, had opportunities to go places, but kind of built a community there in our hometown. And then, we decided to take a chance, and after, it was really Boston College. I was back and forth between Boston College and Philly, at Temple with the Eagles, and had to make decisions on moving away from family and chasing a dream of becoming a head football coach, and that's a family decision. And we had to move 11 times, and the sacrifice that's made is more for the family than it is for the coach, and embracing everything that comes with that. And I think along the way, everybody in the family has to understand, the goal, and the goal is to make an impact on young people. And that's why we're in this profession. And then also embracing the family into recruiting, into, being in the building and being around the players and enjoying game day and all those things. And so, and that's allowed, me the opportunity to continue to work through those moments of doubt that you have along the way. Like, okay, I'm on the road recruiting, for a whole month, after the season, and, I haven't seen my family, and, all coaches kind of go through that same thing of like, all right, is this really worth it? But when the family can support you and be involved, it certainly makes it a lot easier. And then as you work your way during the career, what you realize is that it eventually comes down to the impact you're making on people's lives. And that's where the focus has to be. And so my family has allowed me that opportunity because of the support they've given me.
You're also smart to have a wife whose father is a coach, right? So
it certainly
she kind of knew the deal, and maybe you had an ally there on the other side.
Doesn't make it easier. I can promise you that. They just know exactly what to expect.
How does being someone that has experience in the NFL help you as a college head coach?
A couple things. I think the first thing is that it allows you the opportunity to handle high-end athletes and how you help them get better and being professional, that when you show up, like, you got to be on point because they expect you to be the best in the world at what you do. And if they believe that you're getting them better, then you'll have their attention. If you don't, you can lose them. So I think also, how do you challenge them without making it, adversarial? You have to treat them like men, but you also have to challenge them and create conflict, because that's the only way you get better. So I think how you handle the high-end athlete it was one thing that I really felt like I learned from being in the NFL. I think the second thing is just schematically, as time goes on, the length of an NFL season, how do you get an identity, grab onto it, but then also keep things fresh so you give your guys the best opportunity to be successful and not get into a rut of either running too many things on offense, defense, or special teams where you don't have an identity, or two, running the same things over and over again where, guys can, really narrow in on you and identify what you're trying to do, and finding that balance during a long season.
When I think about the background, we've touched on the UNH part of this, but it was ahead of its time. And then Chips at Oregon, it felt like, okay, what are they doing out there, right? And then I think about like how this is what I love about college football. It's why some of the conference realignment stuff, I've already done this rant far too many times, so I'm not going to share it with you. But I loved Saturdays because I felt like the football represented geographically like the beliefs of how football should be played. And with realignment, I think we'd lose some of that. But if you'd grown up in Iowa, maybe you would be married to a style of football that's different than what you learned in New Hampshire. You know what I mean? Like all of these different places that have these different styles. I mean, how much do you think you are, and I think about this a lot with styles of football and how things have kind of caught up, but like when you're designing philosophically the foundation, everything that you've learned, you go, okay, this is the way football should be played. Do you think it's because you're right? Or do you think it's because that's your background and that's what you're most comfortable with?
No, I think it's a pretty deep discussion. And I think about it a lot. I think about Ohio State, and to your point, like a lot of people and a lot of great coaches have a lot of great ideas. Jim Knowles has run a lot of different styles of defenses. Chip Kelly's run a lot of different styles of offense. You saw him wide open with Oregon with, 4 wides, and you saw him at UCLA, in 22 personnel or 3 tight ends in the game. And so, and even before we went to the no huddle back in college, like that was a bigger, heavier set with fullbacks and running the ball, option football. So the idea is finding the right things that fit your players. And one of them is the skill set that you have on the team. But another thing is based on the opponents that you play and what's coming down the road. And when I think about Ohio State, we're playing in the Big Ten. So there's a certain level of physicality, toughness, run the football that has to run throughout the entire building. If you don't win the rushing yards in the Big Ten, you're not going to win the championship. You have to run the football and stop the run and play physical football. But, as you look at Ohio State, the expectations are to beat the rival, win the Big Ten championship, win the national championship. once you get out of the Big Ten, and you find yourself in a playoff game or in a bowl game, and you're, in an indoor environment, now you may find yourself opening the game up a little bit and having, a game where you need to be able to go play in space. And it turns into a little bit more of a track meet. So what we try to do when we recruit and also when we build our identity in all three phases is, be able to get into a fist fight, in, driving rain and 40-mile-an-hour winds in November, in Chicago, but also, being able to play, in a dome, with a really, athletic team from somewhere else in a different part of the country, if that makes sense.
It does. And when I watch a receiver group, which is, it's absurd, but it feels like kind of when I look at a basketball team, I'll go, okay, they have three great players, but they overlap. It's a bit redundant.
Yeah.
So I may not like this team as much as another team that may not on paper have the same amount of talent, because I feel like the other group complements each other. And when I look at your receiver group and then the Howard dynamic, where if you want to just let him run through guys, you have that you can go to. How much does that balance kind of help you feel like you can get to everything you want to get to on Saturdays?
Well, that was the plan in putting it all together. There's no question about that. Now, what it looks like and how we continue to build and the journey and what we do in these games is to be seen. But everything that you're mentioning was thought out very carefully, and a big part of our job and my job is talent acquisition, making sure that we have these right guys in the right spots. And we've worked hard to make sure that we hand select these guys and do a good job. And listen, we don't get everybody that we want, but the ones that we do everything we can to make sure they understand what it means to be a Buckeye and what we can do, in terms of them after football and the development that's here and all those types of things. And so, we try to go out and do exactly what you said. And when you look at, defensively, kind of where we're at right now, when you look at where we're at offensively, there's a plan for that, and making sure that, we do have all this versatility down the road. But, that's why we've got to just continue to get to work and make sure that we're able to put it on the field.
Okay. Last thing. And I've interviewed enough coaches over the years to think, okay, I might be able to guess the answer. Okay. But I'm still going to try.
Sure.
And it has to do with criticism. Okay. It has to do with criticism at the highest levels. And as I mentioned before, Ohio State's standard is up there with any other program, right? It's expected to win the conference. It's expected to compete for national championships every single year, and you better get a couple, right? And, I do think one of the cool things that you mentioned about guys coming back is a credit to the program. But I also think, and maybe I'm too old and I'm hanging on to some tradition, but I think the fact that you have this class of guys that had never beaten Michigan, that it was really, really important for them to get a win against Michigan at some point and be able to come back to Columbus and not be the group that was like, we actually never beat those guys. And I think that's awesome that matters to a group of young kids, maybe 5 or 6 guys that could have gone in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. So there's a difference between being in the national media, as I've been for years, going back to my early local days, where one of the advantages of being national is I feel like I can see all of it and then kind of compare all the different things, where locally you're so close to it, even though you know it better, I think you can become irrational. And so at the end of last season, I was hearing criticism about you. And again, we don't have any relationship whatsoever, but to me, it was just common sense of like, he's 58-8 now with the, he's 39-3 in the conference. He won the Big Ten the first 2 years he's there. I understand the rivalry part of it, but like, you're mad at this guy. This is the guy you're upset with, which blows my mind. So I did this long segment on the whole thing where I'm like, be careful what you wish for here. Now, the whole reason I set that up is that I know if I ask you, like, does it ever bother you? You're just going to tell me this is what you signed up for. But are there ever moments where maybe it doesn't impact you, but impacts someone close to you, where you feel like, do people realize how good of a job we're actually doing here despite the disappointing regular season end?
Well, I think, after last season and the season before, there's frustration. There's frustration from us more than anybody. The players, the coaches, the ones that are, here in the Woody that are closest to it. And, there's people who love Ohio State football. And when you have 12 million fans, 5% is still a lot of people. And so when you deal with that, you're going to deal with all that comes with that. But you know, when you're frustrated, sure, and we all want to kind of lash out, and we all want to be great. We all want to beat our rival. We all want to win championships. So to see our guys, kind of regroup after that and come back together and keep working towards this is important. I think, when you have an opportunity to have a group of guys like this come together, you just have to focus on day to day. You can't get out in front of it because you want it so bad. And there's nobody who wants it more than the guys in this building. And so, there's a lot that comes with, coaching at the highest level of college football. And, when you have a young family and everything like that, yeah, of course. I mean, that's just real. I mean, we're all human and we all want to do great. And I think probably the thing for my family and I is, when we don't win, we win a lot of games around here, but when we don't win, and certainly, when we lost that game, you just feel like you've let so many people down. And I think that's, where it takes time to recover from. Then you come back together and you make sure that you come back stronger and you learn from why that didn't happen. And then you do everything you possibly can to get yourself back in that situation again and go win those games. And so, that's what we've done. And, the way that you have to look at it is it's an opportunity, and I mentioned this to the staff. I said, no matter what you do in the past, you learn from it, right? And you can prepare for the future, but you got to maximize right now. And how many times in life you're going to have an opportunity to do something special like this. And so that's why we have to maximize every day. I think we're 89 days away from the rivalry game. And, that's 100 and some odd days away from some of these championships. And so every day has to be maximized. And if you start to look at anything else, you can get yourself out of whack and distracted. And so we're not going to do that. So, that gives you a little bit of insight on kind of, where we've been and kind of where we're going in our mindset now.
Yeah. I mean, you can't look ahead, but I already am looking ahead. So I can't wait. And I do think it's a credit to everything you're doing to, we can talk about, hey, there's more incentive for students to stay, which I think is great. But I also think in today's day and age, when that NFL carrot's dangling in front of you to come back to Columbus because you feel like there's unfinished business, I don't know how often that's going to happen in a lot of programs.
Well, I also think when all that gets said, when you talk about the culture of this program and that there is strong stability here in retaining our roster on a yearly basis, and that we don't have to go into the portal to go change 20 to 30% of our roster. It's about 5 to 10% every year. And that matters because, we're not allowed to have a bad year at Ohio State. That's just not possible. So we have to continually build this through great people. And that's through recruiting, talent acquisition, coaching staff members in the building to make sure that the stability is there for an extended period of time as well. And that's another thing that, we make sure that we're all over on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, it's a great start so far. And this is huge for us for you to be able to take the time in a busy schedule. So thanks again.
No, absolutely. Much respect, man.